What a game from Toronto, and what a comeback for the Chicago Bulls. Play-in for the Bulls and Raptors, won by Chicago, 109-105. They were down by as many as 19 points, trailed by 9 entering the final quarter, but came all the way back. And they will play the Miami Heat for the right to play the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's get some insight here. Let's bring in CBS NBA analyst Bill Ryder. Bill, I mentioned down 19, down 9 entering the final quarter. Your biggest takeaway from this amazing Chicago comeback?
Yeah, talk about a Bulls game that was a microcosm for the entire season. So inconsistent, but that second half, Jim, that's the recipe for how they won and how they, try to win going forward. Great defense. They were the 5th best defensively rated team in the NBA this past season. I think we talked about this before the game, and they weren't awesome. They weren't even impressive or good offensively in terms of the numbers, but they had Zach LaVine. And if he could take over and get hot and match it with that Bulls defense, they can be tough for anybody. It's exactly what they did against a pretty good Raptors team, and as you said, a really compelling and impressive comeback.
Let's piggyback off of that, Bill. LaVine scored 29 in the second half, had 39 for the game. He was the go-to guy for the Chicago Bulls. Don't forget, DeMar DeRozan played a boatload of games for Toronto in this arena, but it was LaVine that led the way. Oftentimes we talk about this where stars have their coming out party, if you will. Do you suppose this could be one of those remembrances for Zach LaVine?
Yeah, I think this is who he is, and certainly who the Bulls want him to be and think he can be, Jim. And as you know, over a 7-game series, there's a lot tactically that can go on that can impact the series because it's the same team over and over and over again. But in a 1-game situation, right, either an elimination game, a Game 7, or this bizarre play-in thing that we have now, which I think is really fun and really cool, but it's all on the line. One guy having an extraordinary night and being the best player on the floor that night can really be the difference maker. And we talked about this pregame. Zach LaVine had that in him. He had that ceiling. He got there in the second half, and I think it's a message to the league and really I think to his teammates. They've got a guy, if they can help him and play the level of defense that they did in the regular season, who is capable of taking over some games. And when you have that, it certainly instills you with confidence in the postseason. You can maybe punch above your weight class a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point right there. You don't make a comeback of this magnitude without a little help from the other side. The Toronto Raptors, 18 of 36 from the free throw line, hit just half of those free throw attempts. That includes 1 of 3 from that charity stripe late for Pascal Siakam in an effort to tie the game. He missed the latter 2 of those 3 free throw attempts. If you're Nick Nurse and the Raptors, how do you process what just happened?
Well, it's one of 2 things. You just accept the fact that you had an off night from the stripe and you got to be better, or you tip your cap to DeMar DeRozan's young daughter, who was screaming every single time a Raptor shot a free throw. Because it is, I think, it's a lot like that Timberwolves game in that loss to the Lakers yesterday. This is a game that they gave away. They earned that 19-point lead you talked about, and if they do the small things and the basic things, like make free throws, they win this game and they should win it handily. So they give away points. They obviously let go of that intensity on the defensive end. So I think they're going to feel correctly like their season ended in a situation, in a game that they should have had in control, Jim, and they frankly should have won.
Bill, next up, they go from Toronto to South Beach for the Chicago Bulls. How do you forecast that game against the Heat? It's a win and in scenario.
Yeah, having covered the Heat as a beat writer, I've done that flight. Enjoy the flight. That is a long ways to go, Bulls, Chicago Bulls. Look, you never know, and we've had this conversation that just anything can happen. We'll see what happens in that game. It's one game. But I kind of like Chicago's advantage here. It's been a really bad offense for the Heat as well this year, Jim. But they don't, and I love Jimmy Butler, but they don't have a similar player like Zach LaVine who can just take over a game, and you're like, okay, that guy can score 40 points. That guy can score 25 or 29 in a second half. And they're both great defensively. The Heat are always at that level. But the Bulls, again, really good team on the defensive end. DeMar DeRozan's another offensive weapon. So if you take away some of the realities of the regular season, you just look at how these teams are built. I like the way Chicago matches up against Miami, and I like the fact that, again, they want to win, but they're coming off a win and some momentum, even though they're on the road and they have to travel, and the Heat are coming off that sense of we let a game go already. It'll be close. Anything can happen, but I certainly like the Bulls' chances.
Yeah, the Atlanta Hawks killed the Heat on the rebounding side on that game, and that could be a point of emphasis for the Bulls. Now, when you look at Toronto, the season is now over. The future for Nick Nurse as Raptors coach, perhaps up in the air. How do you summarize the season that was for the Toronto Raptors?
It's a disappointment, and it was a disappointment in the regular season, and certainly was a disappointment this evening, this game, this loss. And talking to folks around the NBA, Jim, that there is a sense of two things. One, that Nick Nurse very well could be on the move. That'll probably be decided over the next week or so. And secondly, part of the reason he might be on the move is because he is one of the most highly coveted coaches in the NBA. If he's available, he's going to have opportunities. And so he knows that there are jobs he can go get. I don't want to say his pick of the litter, but pretty close. Nick Nurse very well may be somewhere next year, and wherever he goes is going to get a really impressive coach, despite the lackluster season his Raptors team just put out there.
Yeah, he does have some pelts on the wall in terms of accomplishments as a head coach, as does our NBA analyst, Bill Ryder. Bill, we always appreciate the insight. Yeah, there was a running of the Bulls north of the border as Chicago rallies from 19 down to win it 109-105. Next up, they get the Miami Heat. This for a shot at the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. You see the bracket is set everywhere else. It's Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and at 3-6 and the 2-7, the Atlanta Hawks against the Boston Celtics. Atlanta getting that 7th seed by way of that win in South Beach.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.